Thank you so much for this invitation. I have never preached from my apartment before, so this is going to be an experiment, and I can think of no better community that I'd like to make this experiment with, so I am honored to be here. This is a special moment for me, getting to speak with all of you, because I am a huge fan of all three of your ministers, all of whom I have the honor of calling my friends. And I am so looking forward to getting to know all of you after this service, hearing about your concerns and passions and answering questions that you might have about the immigrant justice work that the New Sanctuary Coalition does. So I'm going to try to keep my excitement contained and myself composed, but my main spiritual gift is overwhelming enthusiasm, so we'll see how that goes. The New Sanctuary Coalition, or NSC, as you will hear me lovingly call it, is an immigrant-led, faith-based immigrant justice organization. And my job, as Reverend Will told you, is basically to meet with faith leaders and congregations and invite them to get involved with the direct service and community organizing that NSC does. And I'm going to put all of my cards on the table right now and basically tell you the main thesis of my sermon right here. I want to make a deal. I want West End to get more deeply involved with NSC and with immigrant justice. It's that simple. We have four main tenets at NSC. No human being is illegal. Thank you, Sam, for teaching our young folks that. No judgment, respect, and do no harm. And there are multiple ways for you to embody these tenets and multiple ways for you to be a part of the radical hospitality and accompaniment work that we do. And we need you. Reverend Sam has already done some wonderful work with us, and I hope this service today is just the start of a co-creative, justice-minded, spirit-fueled relationship. And there are lots of statistics I can give you about how horribly our country treats certain immigrants, how racist our immigration system and policies are, how the cruel and arbitrary ways we make certain immigrants feel unwelcome and dehumanized intersect with every other justice issue in this country, how our racist detention center complex is tied to the racist prison industrial complex, and how these continuing racist and white supremacist systems are, yes, exacerbated by the horrific policies of our current administration, but are also far larger than this current administration. And there are lots of ways that NSC can welcome you to not drown in despair over these realities, and instead give your time and energy and faith to being helpers in the fight for immigrant justice. And I could rattle off all of these statistics and opportunities, but I grew up in a tradition where the most effective way to invite people into a new understanding of how God can move in the world is through testimony, through simple personal storytelling, testifying, giving a glimpse into both the troubling realities of the world and the glorious possibilities of what God can do through community. So I'm not really going to sermonize right now or offer a bunch of statistics. We can talk about details after the service. Right now, I'm going to testify. But first, I want to ground my testimony in the ancient testimony we just heard, that beautiful tale of Ruth and Naomi. And if you need a refresher on the specifics of this story, no judgment, here are some Cliff's Notes. In Hebrew scripture, Naomi is an older woman who is forced into migration by the famine sweeping through her native land. And luckily, she's got her husband and two sons as companions. And soon after they arrive in their new home, her sons marry two native women. But soon after that, all three of the men die. And in ancient times, women without men were vulnerable, poor, and unaccompanied. So grief-stricken Naomi decides to migrate back to her original home and tells her widowed daughters-in-law that she's going to migrate alone. But her daughter-in-law Ruth responds with this courageous act of queer compassion. Ruth tells Naomi she's going to migrate with her, accompany her. Ruth's going to go to a land where Ruth herself will be a foreigner, just so she can take care of this woman to whom she now feels forever bonded. And they make a deal, creating one of our most powerful scriptural examples of non-traditional family, based not in blood, but in mutual responsibility and care. Ruth and Naomi become sanctuaries for one another, redefining the possibilities of family and accompaniment. And in Hebrew, the name Ruth means friend. And friend is the term that we at NSC use to reference the immigrant clients who come to us for services. And our main programs provide help with legal paperwork, bond payments, physical sanctuary, and accompaniments to check-ins with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. And it's a simple model. In the face of alienation sown by ICE, we simply accompany, creating connection when ICE wants immigrants to feel abandoned and alone. But beyond these direct services, we at NSC also attempt to create relationship and solidarity that move far beyond the transactional to the spiritual. We try to embody what Ruth did for Naomi. We refuse to let grief and fear be the final answer for our friends. And like Ruth, we say, where you go, I will go. Where you die, I will die. We try to become sanctuaries for one another. Now, this accompaniment work has more disappointments than wholesale successes, more emergencies than outright achievements. We are a small organization fighting a huge system. So among the despondent discord, we at NSC search for what we call tiny bubbles of victory, reminders of the power of the Judeo-Christian tradition of hospitable, responsible accompaniment. And I want to showcase one of those victory bubbles today by telling you a story of the power of accompaniment, the story of our friend Cassandra. So when Cassandra first approached NSC, she had been abandoned by her high-priced lawyer, and she was seeking accompaniment to an upcoming ICE check-in. Required ICE check-ins for immigrants can range from as infrequently as a few times a year to as frequently as several times a month. But no matter how frequent, these check-ins are always frightening. Accompaniment eases the fear a bit, but can't completely erase it, because with or without accompaniment, an immigrant checking in with ICE, particularly a Black or brown immigrant, can disappear in a moment. And Cassandra had filed paperwork. She was complying with orders. She had ticked all the boxes she'd been told to tick. She'd been living and working in the United States since 2015, when she had arrived on a boat seeking asylum from her native Haiti. She had been contributing to this country's interdependent community as a home health aide, regularly paying taxes as any citizen does. But Cassandra's contribution to this country was continually haunted by her initial means of courageous arrival, that boat she had boarded in order to arrive at the shore of the United States to seek a better life and better work. And despite doing everything right, showing up for every check-in, filling out every bit of paperwork, Cassandra was now being told that she was in danger of deportation. So with that threat looming, our first accompaniment with Cassandra was harrowing, but it ended with a 1-month extension to allow her to file further paperwork. And I cannot stress enough how maddeningly arbitrary ICE's decisions to deport versus extend are. In all of the check-ins I've accompanied, and that's a lot, the reason for one decision being made over another is never quite clear, never quite explained, always a conveniently murky mess. But we left Cassandra's first check-in feeling like we had something like God on our side. I had done the talking, basically just asking questions until the ICE officer can't stand it anymore, and I call that tactic the theology of annoyance. And that day, the attending officer came right out and said that she was extending the case simply so she didn't have to hear my voice anymore. So when we come back a month later, with more documentation in hand, with more accompaniment volunteers accompanying, with this loudmouth minister in clergy drag, we have a feeling that Cassandra might be okay, that presence plus paperwork might now be enough. And with such arbitrariness always in play, it's hard for any of us at NSC to know how our presence is or is not effective. But that day, something weird happens. For years, NSC accompanists have been allowed to sit in the waiting room with our immigrant friends. But on this day, the dozens of us are met at the door by 3 security guards who announce a mysterious new policy that forbids anyone except summoned immigrants and their lawyers from entering the waiting area. Brand new policy. And my motor mouth questioning kicks in, and somehow, arbitrarily, I am then allowed in with Cassandra. Now, a typical accompaniment usually lasts an hour or 2. And as excruciating as that is, on this day with Cassandra, things start to feel strange. Cassandra and I wait an hour, then another hour, then another hour, then another hour. And this is for an appointment for which Cassandra has arrived 30 minutes early and taken off of her hourly wage work. 4 hours into this cramped, crowded moment, in this cramped, crowded waiting room, where even silence would be enough to drive one crazy, but instead of silence, blaring from 2 television screens is that game show, Let's Make a Deal. Screams and bells and whistles and unhinged capitalism screaming in every frightened ear. And up until that day, I'd never really known what comes on after Let's Make a Deal because we'd never had to wait so long. And do you have a guess as to what comes on after Let's Make a Deal? And I've tested this now several times, so I know it happens every day. Fox News, blaring in the canals of already frightened ears. And on that day, Cassandra's name is finally called, and we stand together, and we walk to the door. And an ICE agent says to me, "Who are you?" And I say, "I'm Cassandra's minister." And he snorts and pushes me physically out of the threshold, pulling Cassandra inside and slamming the door in my face. And I wait and wait and wait. And Fox News blares. And hours go by and things start to feel stranger and stranger and worse and worse. And finally, the ICE agent emerges and says, "She's being moved. You'll hear from her later." And I ask, "Can you tell me something now?" And he smirks and says, "She's being moved. You'll hear from her later." And I ask, can you tell me something now? And here's where it gets really strange. Because his smirk becomes a cold smile. And he says, listen, I know all you bleeding hearts. I know you care for these people. But this isn't the old administration. We're moving Haitians as quickly as they can get here. It's the new regime. Your accompaniment doesn't matter anymore. And I want you to take that in, because it will come back later. Your accompaniment doesn't matter anymore. And oddly, it's like he thinks he's meeting me on my level and bringing me back down to earth. I ask if I can say goodbye. He says yes, but in the same breath, I watch him turn to the only other person left in the waiting room, a Honduran woman waiting for her husband, and he tells her in front of me that she won't be able to say goodbye. Arbitrariness abounds. And minutes tick by, and finally a door opens. And I'm allowed into a tiny room where Cassandra is literally shivering in a corner. The scene is cinematic, chilling enough to seem scripted, and I am told that I can hug Cassandra, who is pleading silently with her eyes, and in the middle of our hug, a new officer who I have never seen before slithers into the room and announces, all right, you gotta end this. We gotta move the body. And in that instant, I see and hear someone kill someone else with 5 words. To them, Cassandra is no longer a person, if she ever was. They've made her dead weight. There's nothing more for me to do. Cassandra is now a body that's gotta be moved. Our accompaniment doesn't matter anymore. But here's where the story gets good. Thanks to the amazing NSC volunteer network, calls and letters pour in. When the system is as arbitrary as it is, it's easy for NSC to simply go for broke, trying anything and everything, leaving messages, getting signatures, even making friendly with as many ICE officers as we can. And while we wait for word, we work, we network, we create community to undergird the work, and we pray. And somehow, even though the ruling was for Cassandra's immediate deportation, Cassandra sits in the Bergen County Jail for 4 months. Then, at the start of the 5th month, Cassandra is granted a hearing. And NSC does what we do best. We gather up 25 accompaniments, and all of us go to the courtroom. And Cassandra is there looking diminished in gray prison scrubs. And the hearing goes by astonishingly quickly. A bond price is set to spring Cassandra from her 4-month detention. A new court date is set, granting Cassandra time to gather evidence for her continuing asylum claim. And we're all ecstatic but weary, and Cassandra just looks tired. And then something mystical happens. And it's going to sound like I'm making this up, but we are people of faith, and dozens of other people heard this. As the judge is recording the outcome into her tiny microphone, she says something that I had never heard in all the check-ins and court appearances that I've accompanied. At the end of her statement, the judge looks out at all of us gathered, and she smiles and says, almost lovingly, into the microphone, "Let it be known that there are 25 members of Cassandra's church here with her, which shows that she is connected to and contributes to a large, loving community. I have it emblazoned on my brain. Let it be known that there are 25 members of Cassandra's church here with her, which shows that she is connected to and contributes to a large, loving community, officially, in the recorded ruling. And the next day, I take a check to 26 Federal Plaza. I wait 3 hours as they send word to New Jersey, and Cassandra is sprung from her cell. She gets to change into something other than gray, and she loves colors. And she gets to prepare for the next step of her journey. And now we, friends who are connected to and contribute to a large, loving community, enjoy Cassandra's company every week as she has become one of the most active members of our NSC volunteer community, using her own experience to connect to the experiences of others, creating connection where ICE so desperately wants to create alienation. And Cassandra still has to regularly check in. And the arbitrariness could rear its head again at any moment. But she is connected to and contributes to a large, loving community that will not let her disappear again without one hell of a fight. ICE tried to take Cassandra and make her into just a body, just dehumanized dead weight. But a group of faithful friends made a deal and refused to let Cassandra's humanity be stripped from her. A group of faithful friends exclaimed, "Where Cassandra goes, we will go. Where Cassandra dies, we will die." And we didn't stop or shut up until she was released back into the sanctuary of our friendship, back into her own life. And so this is not a feel-good story. There is no happy ending. It's just a victory bubble, fragile and poppable, much needed mystical proof that when a loving spiritual community sets out to do something, when a group of spiritual friends makes a deal to accompany one of its members and not let them disappear into a cruel, racist, arbitrary system, it is within the realm of possibility that this act of accompaniment will be noticed and noted. And true success is having the noticing and the noting compounding at a rate that outruns the arbitrariness of empire. Where you go, I will go. Where you die, I will die. Ruth's promise to Naomi echoes throughout all of NSC's work. And every so often, even in that confusing fortress of a building, even as the hysterics of let's make a deal bleeds into the histrionics of Fox News, even as officers strip people of their humanity with 5-word clusters, we sometimes see our promises of unwavering accompaniment pay off in simple, earth-shaking ways. So, my testimony is over. And I trust we've got lots to talk about from here. But for now, as people of faith, as people of hope, as people of justice, as people of victory bubbles, let's make a deal. In the wake of continuing cruelty from this country's racist, dehumanizing systems, let's not build higher walls. Let's be sanctuaries for one another. In the face of intentionally arbitrary, cruelly confusing rules, let's not invent borders that keep us imprisoned in fear. Let's open our sanctuary doors and redefine radical relationship. In a time when the word sanctuary is being carelessly thrown around by politicians, let's make a deal to reclaim it and embody sanctuary, to become sanctuaries ourselves. We are embodying sanctuary every time we say, where you will go, I will go. Where you die, I will die. Your God shall be my God. And then actually do the hard spiritual work to make sure we mean it. And until we can finally drive a permanent spoke into this country's dehumanizing racist systems for good, which I know is on the horizon, until that day, we are the creators of victory bubbles. So let's make a deal to create as many of those victories as possible, to open our sanctuaries to as many friends as possible, until one by one, our acts of faithful accompaniment create the radical relational change we so desperately wish to see in the world. Amen.